Neville, Medhora, welcome to the show. How you doing, man?
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
This is good. I've admittedly been following you for a while, and we only recently got connected through Nick Gray, who on, I don't know if it was his terms or your terms, hosted a party. Whose idea was the party?
That was 2 days before. I was just having dinner with him. He's like, you want to host a party at your place? I was like, okay. And he did it. And like, I don't know what, like 30, 40 people showed up?
Yes.
Like on such short notice. He's a master at it.
He has a very contagious personality.
Yeah.
Like he's just friendly and jolly and goofy, and he's totally himself. And so it's fun to go to his parties and just see like what kind of quirky things are going to come out.
Well, it's fun because he's hosted a couple of them at my place, and it's kind of nice because he's so responsible, and his crowd doesn't usually like drink. It's like usually like random days, and it's like in and out. He has like that book all about like a 2-hour cocktail party.
Yeah.
And so people barely drink. They're really cool. They're all vetted by him, and I get all the credit because I'm hosting it at my house, but I don't do anything. So like literally 5 minutes before that party, I got ready. And then we had a bunch of cool people show up. So it's kind of nice.
Yeah, a ton of cool people. Like,
yeah.
There were so many awesome people that I was like, oh my gosh, like there's just some big players here. This is crazy. But he's very, very well connected, obviously.
Yeah, I'm doing another one with him. I won't say when, but like a Twitter party. I've always wanted to meet all the people I follow on Twitter. And there's like a fair amount in Austin that just never met. And so I have some people over to co-work and stuff all the time. But then I was like, I wonder if I just meet everyone at the same time. That'd be cool. And then everyone can like co-meet and stuff.
So do you have to have like a bomb Twitter account to be able to attend this party?
Not specifically. It's just like people I know. And I made a joke. I was just like, this is going to be just like a Silicon Valley party. It's going to be like 85% dudes and everyone's borderline autistic. That's exactly what it's going to be like.
Everyone has like 7 businesses that they're all trying to run.
Oh my God. It'll be interesting. Just like a Twitter dorks meetup. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, cool. So I've been wanting to talk to you for a while, and so I'm super glad we're doing this. And I think some of the main things that we want to cover that could be helpful for this audience is really just helping people understand from the get-go what copywriting even is. Because like I would argue that copywriting is... It's basically, in my understanding, it's sales with words is what I think most people understand it as. Can we just start off by just like helping people understand what is copywriting and why should people know and understand it?
Yeah. So in my opinion, so sales with words is correct generally. In my opinion, the definition has morphed, right? Because we don't just have text anymore. We have images, we have audio, soon we'll have virtual reality experiences. So in my opinion, copywriting is moving information from my brain to your brain, or my brain to your brain and a million brains watching, right? And so what's the most effective way to do that and get them to do something? That's either to learn something, convey an idea, or make a sale. And so that's what I think copywriting is. And so for example, if I were to tell someone, let's say I have a son and I say, clean your room. Well, the reason he will clean his room is under a threat, right? Just because I'm bigger than him, right? But that's not the greatest way to approach it. However, with copywriting, there's like formulas and tactics you can use. So there's one called AIDA. So like attention, interest, desire, action. So I apply, okay, how can I get his attention? So I say, hey, little Jimmy, you want to go to the theme park this afternoon? And he'll be like, oh boy, do I. And so then you say like, they have rides there. They have elephants, they have go-karts. It's going to be really fun, right? He's like, oh my God, excited. So then you try to get him to desire to do the thing you want, clean his room. So then you say, well, you know, we have to finish our chores. I've got to clean the kitchen first and you got to clean your room. So if we do it real fast, we could just get going. And so he'll be like, okay. And he goes and cleans his room. So you got him to do what you wanted to, and it didn't even seem like a chore to him. And then so the action is clean his room, and you got him to do it. So instead of saying, clean your room and not having him build that habit, we made it a fun thing, right? So that's what copywriting is, trying to find like a way to ease someone into doing what you want to where they view it as a benefit.
Yeah, and I admittedly use AIDA all the time, honly, ever since I learned it from you. Of like, I use it in my newsletters, I use it in my social media, I use it in email campaigns, all those things. I also heard you touch on once about like that concept of delivering ideas. And I heard you talk about how like even TikTok is a great way to basically deliver ideas quickly. And it's one of the reasons that we're seeing the video platform being another form of copywriting, one might say, is because like really it's just like how can we deliver a message or an idea as quickly and as efficiently as possible, right? So much of it used to be like write the ultimate blog on X topic, and now it's kind of shifted of like, well, how can I just transfer this idea in a more relatable or an easier way for people to digest and understand? What are you seeing in like the current like market today of like what are some of the useful things from a copywriting standpoint that are really effective that other people can maybe apply?
Yeah, so a couple of things. One of the reasons that text was big before and blog posts were big before, guess what? we didn't have the option to make videos back then, right? 10 years ago, it was a lot harder to make videos. 20 years ago, it was nearly impossible, right? Video on the internet used to be like 10-second clips that you download in like WMV format, open up your Windows movie player while your computer freezes. It was impossible to deliver videos. Like, it just wasn't a thing. So in the 1400s, books were all the rage because that was the technology. And so now we have technology where we have like unlimited access to video where it's just not even a problem anymore. So of course, things are going to move to that. Think about how you are learning and talking right now. You are learning through your ears and your eyes, right? These are the sensories thing that you're using. So when we look at a YouTube video, TikTok video, Instagram video, we're using our ears and eyes just like we do in real life. So I would say that video is going to become far more important than just the written word. However, what you want to do when you're writing a video is, let's say you're talking about something like how to make a podcast. Instead, one of the copywriting principles that you always learn is that stories tend to do better than a strict how-to. So how-tos are great, but a story tends to be better. So if you say, here's how to make a podcast. Step 1, get a mic. Step 2, get video, whatever, right? That's okay, that's instructional. But with copywriting, you're kind of like, what if we can massage that into a story? What if we can change the way that you tell that and say like, hey, my name's Corey. I started a podcast and I got 40 clients in my first week. Here's what I did. That's a little bit more interesting, right? It's a little more relatable to the person. And so copywriting is about kind of trying to hack people's brains more so than the actual medium or platform. So the only hardware that hasn't changed in this whole situation in the last 10 years is your brain. It hasn't changed in roughly 5,000 years, 10,000 years, right? So the same things that got people to buy and motivated people to do things back 10,000 years ago are still the exact same thing today. They have not changed. The medium of communication has changed. Maybe in 10 years, this will be a virtual reality experience, right? It'll all change, but the actual psychology is the thing that hasn't changed. And so that's what we usually try to teach people. And so with video, it's like the same stuff we teach on for sending a newsletter. Could you tell a story? Could you add some pictures? Can you add examples? Can you give them reasons they should do video? Can you tell them different examples of people who are doing podcasts? And so that's what copywriting is. It's not so much about the medium that we currently have, but more about the psychology of your brain.
Yeah, you're hitting on something that I've just found so fundamental, just marketing in general, is that idea of storytelling. Is like, it's literally been the thing that we relate to for arguably thousands of years. And it's like, I've been reading all these marketing books lately, and they all just go back to that same philosophy and principle of like the hero's journey. Right? Is like, you have somebody that's struggling. It's the classic Star Wars or Lord of the Rings, or name your thing, of like, it's somebody who's struggling in this issue and they're having this problem. And then essentially they find the mentor that can give them the advice to show them how to overcome this obstacle. And they basically go from like, life is horrible and terrible to now like everything is wonderful and amazing. And so do you also apply to those principles as well when you're doing your copywriting? Or
kind of, but a lot of the stuff, let's say Twitter, like, you don't have space to make like this gigantic thing like that. And so what happens is you can make a story that's very quick. It's just like, I bought this candle and it made my apartment smell great, and here's the reasons that it's good. That could be a story just on its own. That was the world's shittiest example I just used there. But the point is, you can tell a story without having to go into this big, long story. So I think there's such thing as long-winded stories where people don't care, right? So I think like if Tony Robbins told like this long emotional story, people care a little bit more. If you're kind of a nobody, it's not as interesting sometimes, but it has to be relatable. So for example, I think people are generally pretty selfish, and I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just how humans are. It's how everyone is. And you're learning from, so for example, I like listening to Warren Buffett. Now, why do I like listening to Warren Buffett? Because I really care about him, or because he's really rich and I think I can learn something? Let's be honest. That's the reason, right? That's why I'm listening to him. So I don't really care about him per se, but I do want to know his background. I want to know that he's super rich. I kind of want to know how he made his money. He made it in like this, like, pretty ethical way. He made it like a slow and steady kind of way. That's what I want to know about him because it applies to me, right? And so that's why stories are interesting. They're like, a couple years ago, I was big and fat, and now I'm super strong and lean. Now, they don't care about you specifically, but they're like, oh, he's like me. I'm big and fat, and I want to get to where he is. And so people can relate to you that way. So that's why people care about your story a little bit, because they're saying, what can I pick up from this?
Yeah.
Also, we're human. We learn through analogies. We learn through examples like that. That's generally how we learn the best.
Right. Because it makes you human, right? Is to know that you went through an experience and people can relate to that and they go, oh yeah, okay, if he could do it, I could do it, essentially.
So for example, like I go to the gym, I'm 39 years old, approaching 40, right? And I go to this gym called Squash and there's like a ton of like jacked people there. And sometimes I look around, I'm like, I wonder what are other people doing? But then if someone's 25, I think they're in a different stage of life than I am. Like I'm trying to like not hurt myself and still say, Jack, these guys are 25. I remember being that age. You could just push as much as you want. And it didn't matter. Like nothing mattered back then. And so I'm like, I'm not necessarily looking at the 25-year-old guy, but I'm looking at the guy that's a little bit older than me who's really jacked. And I'm like, what's he doing? That's the person I want to know from. And so I'm looking like, where can I learn from properly? And so that's what stories are. So if there's like an older guy, he's just like, yeah, I used to get hurt all the time, but now I do this. I'd be like, yeah. That's what I want.
One of my favorite memes is it's a photo of a guy in his 20s and he's like, I just want to get jacked. And then it's a photo of a guy in his 30s and he's like, I want to be strong. And then it's a guy in his 40s and he's like, I just want things not to hurt. And it's like funny how we go through those stages of like understanding where people are at. And I think that's another huge principle of marketing, or even from what I've learned actually from doing this podcast show, is that I'll have certain conversations that maybe don't necessarily resonate with me, but then I'll get messages or emails and people are like, oh, I love this and this connected with me. And it always reminds me that people are on a different stage of their journey, which leads me to my next question about like, in terms of your journey, what are maybe some of the earlier phases of how you got into copywriting and when you realized like, this is really important, this is really powerful that people should be doing?
Yeah, I was always kind of like an entrepreneur since high school. I'd started like some like small little companies, little websites that had AdSense on them, all those types of little things. And I started a rave company in high school that carried on throughout college. And it was called House of Rave. I don't know if it still exists anymore. But I still light up and glow stuff. And so it was an e-commerce company, essentially. People bought stuff, I outsourced it to a supplier, drop shipped it, and that was that. And so I started learning about copywriting circa 2011 or so. And I was reading the Gary Halbert letters, the Boron letters. He wrote these from jail, and they're like from the 70s. So it's old information, but still very relevant to psychology. So I read those and I was like, this is really interesting. And so I thought, well, I have an email list of about 7,500 people on House of Rave that opted in for our newsletter. And so what I did was I would send out newsletters, but they never make sales. So I just assumed that like newsletters didn't work. And then I wrote it in the way that Gary Halbert said, like, tell a story, tell a reason why you're holding the sale, talk about one product, don't like talk about a million products. And so I did that, and it was my highest sales day like I ever had. And I was like, is this a fluke? And then I did it again and again. And almost overnight, House of Rave went from I'm hoping and praying someone comes to my website and buys something from a search engine versus to a email marketing company. That's where I'd make all my sales. And then Noah Kagan, one of my good buddies, was building AppSumo, and it was a little side project of his. And he was sending out these emails for deals to all these people. And like the emails were horrible. It'd be like, here's 25% off grasshopper.com. That was it. Like that was all. And it was working, but like, okay. And I was like, I wonder if you can make these way better with this copywriting stuff I'm doing. So I wrote one of the emails, highest sales day ever in AppSumo history. We did it again. And we're just like, okay, there's something to this. And all I was doing, instead of saying, here's 25% off grasshopper.com, I would say, do you know what grasshopper.com is? It's actually the site that makes a phone tree. So, you call a lawyer's office and it's like, please hold to talk to the shipping department, whatever, like that. It makes a phone tree. So if you're a one-person company, like I was with my Rave company, you can make this big sounding company by saying, press 1 to talk to shipping, press 2 if you have a customer support thing. It actually gave you time to answer your phone correctly, and it made you seem really big. And so I showed how you can make yourself look really big as a solopreneur. And then at the end, I said, guess what? You can get 25% off right now. That structure worked so much better than just say, get 25% off, right? Because I explained who could use it. I explained, let's say you're a lawyer and you're a one-person law firm. You can make it look like you're a bigger law firm. You're like me, where you're a one-person e-commerce company. You can make it look a lot bigger. You could get more time to answer the phone by making people go through these hoops. And so that all those reasons, people thought like, oh, I could totally use this. So it's more about educating people than selling them. And by the end, if they were the right match, they would naturally in their head think, I should get this, and there's a deal. Why would I not get it right now?
Yeah, it's basically applying it as to why they would want it or why it would be useful for them, right? I feel like there's so much empathy in copywriting and understanding who you're talking to and why it's even relevant to them. Like if you keep the focus on like who you're talking to and how it's actually going to help their life, you can have a far bigger impact than just like buy this thing because it's cool and it has all these widgets.
Yeah. So that's why when people are just like, I'm just going to tell my story, it's just like people have to learn from your story. So you have to structure it in a way that they're actually going to learn from your story. But yeah, that's copywriting in a nutshell. That's how I got started. And then from there, I realized it's kind of one of the things that's like the easiest thing to do, but the biggest outcome. So for example, there's like a fertilizer company that was a client. They sold like farm equipment, but like a lot. Like when farmers buy something, they buy, for like 800 acres of crops or whatever, right? So they sell fertilizer. It's like $2 million at a time worth of stuff. They sell like a year contract. And so what they were doing was cold outreaching. They had 12 salespeople. And so they had this cold email that was frankly pretty bad. And I was like, I bet you could get more responses if you just changed it up like this. So instead of this long thing about the history of the company, it was like this 2-page email. I'm like, this is horrible. And so what we said was, what if we just said, hey, we can get fertilizer 25% cheaper than XYZ, their competition. And it was easy to find their competition because you know where their farm is and you know the closest place. And then it said like, we can get you a delivery starting tomorrow. You interested? And they would respond back. And that cold email alone just boosted their conversion rate a ton. Now imagine that they get one more sale for $2 million that month. That dramatically impacts things across 12 salespeople, right? So you notice how these things compound by just having a higher conversion rate on those things. So that's a crazy thing where the average sale is very high. But if you have a product on Amazon and you position it slightly different, get 20% more sales, isn't that a good thing? Or if you get 100 people going to your Corey Hibben website and only one person signs up each 100 visits, what if you can get that up to 10 people per 100 visits, day after day after day? So after 365 days in a year, if you have a 1% conversion rate, you have an email list of 365 people. Versus if you get a 10% conversion rate, you have 3,650 people. So that's the power of copywriting. I think you can make these small changes that have these massive results without having to do much. Like nothing I said requires different tech. Nothing I said requires different anything. It's just changing words and layouts and methods on a page.
I love that because you're talking about essentially the compounding effect of something that seems minuscule, like just words on a page. But realistically, if you take that into consideration of like days, months, years, and depending on how much traffic you're getting, that can have profound impacts on basically how much you're converting, right?
Yeah, completely. That's why I'm saying it's such a big deal. The other thing is like, for example, pricing. A lot of people don't associate that with copywriting, but think about it. At the end, sometimes there's people with great sales pages, and at the end they're like, well, here's how to buy it. Send me a PayPal payment. And you're just like, wait, really? Like that's how you're saying to do it? But believe it or not, this is still the way some people operate. And I'm just like, what if we have a pricing table with one side is like $50 or one side's $200 with the in-person consult, something like that. And so that's also copywriting of getting the point across of what to buy. Like telling them what's the best thing to buy right now and giving them some options. That's also copywriting. You work with a lot of different health coaches, right? So like trainers and stuff, right? So I've actually worked with some higher end trainers before that do 10,000 plus a month, which I think is pretty high for a trainer. And one of the things that we implemented for a couple of them was different packages people could get. So this might be off topic, but let me explore this idea. So let's say you're a you're a personal trainer, that's what it's called. And so I say that you say, how much per session? I ask you how much, and you say $75. Well, now you just pigeonholed yourself into $75. I can actually afford more than $75 per session. We said 75, so this is where we are. Now, if you say, well, there's another thing for 100, I'd be like, I'm just going to do 75. So instead, what a lot of these people do is they offer a package, and they say, look, like we're not going to go based on like session per session. I can't help you. I can't do that. I need at least 6 months with you, right? And I need to meet you at least 3 to 4 times a week. And so what we're going to do is we're going to peg it at, it comes out to $75 a session, but I'm also going to track your food intake or something like that. So then you say that the package is $500 a month. I also have this other thing, if you want, where every single day I also call you and make sure you're eating well. And that's $1,000 a month. And so then you have like, okay, 500 versus 1,000. You're like, well, I don't want to spend 1,000. That's kind of a lot. But 500 sounds good. It almost sounds like a deal now, right? So what I subconsciously did to this guy is I targeted my services at $1,000, but he thinks he's getting a deal for 500, right? So instead of, so now 500 divided by 4, let's say per week, I actually boosted my price up to what, 125 a session rather than 75 a session. I didn't do anything. I didn't really do anything. I just positioned it differently like that.
Yeah, I think one of the things I learned recently too was like having those 3 tiers, but also always like when I'm having a conversation, starting with the higher tier, because then anything you say after the higher tier sounds like a good deal, right? Like normally it's 10,000, but for this one I'll do 5,000 or whatever the case might be, depending upon what you're selling, whether you're a trainer or a coach or whatever it is. But I love just this 3-tier process that people can do, whether it's the services that they're offering or on their website or in their copy. I think people hopefully now realize like copywriting is essential to their business and actually converting traffic into leads and actually getting people to work with them. What are some of the low-hanging fruits that people could really start to tackle right away? I know you mentioned that you had, for example, that large newsletter of 7,500 people, I think it was, with Rave. What if somebody was in that situation where like maybe they're on social media, they're posting stuff, they're trying to engage with their audience, but they're not really growing a newsletter? Like how would somebody even begin to figure out how to grow a newsletter just from the get-go?
Well, I don't know if they necessarily need a newsletter right away. I mean, newsletter's hard. And are we specifically talking about in the health space?
Yeah, health, fitness, wellness.
Yeah. So health and fitness, there's a lot of content. There's a lot of content, right? And the reason is every single person in the world has a certain level of health, could probably use a little bit more. There's a lot of bad health out there. So that's why it's a big industry. Like there's so many players, but you could still do well on YouTube. You could still do well on Instagram. You could still do well on Twitter on these things if you're good. And so I think for those things, I think one of the things if in my copywriting brain, what I'm actually doing is like, what are you really selling? Right? There's a lot of places you can go for personal training. What I am actually buying is you. You, the product. You're the product. So the trainer is the product. So for example, if I have a big fat trainer, I don't trust him. I'm sure he knows what to do to make me jacked. But if I have a big fat guy, like I'm just like, well, you're big and fat. If I follow what you do, I'm going to be like you.
Right.
So that's why I think it's often important. You see some of the top trainers, guess what? They're pretty in shape for the most part. Or for example, there's the trainers that are like in okay shape, but they're older people and they only train other older people that are execs and stuff. So they're like, we're not going to make you do 400-pound squats. Rather, we're doing more like rehab, PT combo with training. And they go just for a higher end, older client. So you are the product, actually. I think that's very important to notice. So I think there's some trainers who are just like, how do I get more money? I'm like, well, what about you will want people to, higher end people to hire you? So for example, I knew this one guy who's really good, really tall, really good looking, and he trained like these big execs, and he was like a former bodybuilding champion. So the big execs want to pay a lot of money. They could kind of get their pick of the litter, and like having a former bodybuilding champion was like kind of who you want as your trainer. And so I think being accomplished in some way like that, or presenting yourself in that way is important. I think you have to be an aspirational character a little bit.
Yeah, I literally, speaking of copywriting, just wrote a newsletter about this, about the halo effect. Are you familiar with this philosophy? Of that? Basically, like, whether we like it or not, we tend to favor people who are good looking or attractive or charismatic, regardless of like what they actually know or how skilled they are.
Totally.
Is that we for sure have a first impression on people as well. And so when we're talking about like the health or fitness or even like doctors or chiros, which I think is a huge area where a lot of people in the healthcare space are really missing, is that concept of being relatable. I think the healthcare has done a terrible job of actually making themselves relatable. I think they try to put themselves on this pedestal, and then it's very hard to relate or connect with them. When in reality, in today's world, I think there's a huge opportunity for them to, like, if they had a video or they had an Instagram, or like even what you're seeing with a lot of like whatever MDs, carnivore MDs, like name your things, like they've figured out that if I can be more relatable with my audience, I can help them and serve them in a better way. Is that kind of what you're touching on in terms of like, you don't need a newsletter, you just basically need a way to show that you can connect and relate to the people you're trying to connect with?
I think if you're starting off from the very beginning, I mean, all those things help. I mean, one of my biggest regrets was not having a newsletter early on and collecting emails. That was one of my biggest regrets way back in the day. I had a popular financial blog, and back in the day, people didn't really do as much of the email sign-up stuff. And I was like, damn, that would have been crazy. And so I always think you should have some way to collect emails, because that is the number one way to connect with your audience. That's the only avenue you own. You don't own your Instagram connection to them. You don't own your Twitter connection to them necessarily. You do own the email. And so I think that's a great way to do it. But also, I've seen a lot of people just go on Instagram and just start posting regularly. That's one way. And then I also see some people that don't do a lot of social media because they're just not good at it, but they're always religiously at gyms. So for example, at a gym, like there's a lot of your target audience over there. And I've seen some trainers that will go and just be like, oh dude, you should, you know, if you just put your arm like that, that would help a lot. And they don't try to say like, I'm a trainer, come work with me. But they build relationships like that over time. They give a lot of information out for free. And then they later down the line, when that guy's like, yeah, I probably need a trainer, they end up going to that guy because he's given a lot of good information. So I think there's a lot of different ways to approach it rather than just social media. But man, social media amplifies your conversation so much and you never know who sees it, right? So let's say we're recording this right now. Someone sees it, hears it 2 years down the line. Like we haven't done anything since then, but maybe they said, hey, I'd like to hire Corey for my website. Maybe I'd like to hire Neville for this. I mean, this kind of thing amplifies your message a lot. So I don't know, what do you see people doing in the health industry? Is it like just running Instagrams? Like what is it?
Yeah, and that's kind of the question I wanted to get posed on you, because like I think you'd be a great person to ask this, is that yes, I would say the majority of the people that I see they've done a great job of building this audience, having a personal brand, one might say, and really representing themselves as somebody that's healthy and fit or understands wellness, or even I have a lot of people in like physical therapists or chiros and doctors, and they're really good, honestly, about producing really high quality content because they're very educated in their profession, but they just have no idea how to take this great attention that they've garnished and rather build a newsletter or turn them into customers or actually build a relationship with them. They just don't know how to make that transition basically from just having an audience to making that relationship with them. So I'd be curious as to what you've seen, or if you have any ideas of like how somebody could build that relationship and essentially get them off the platform. Because you're right, like you're hanging out on rented space, right? Like I have a number of friends and clients who have had $50, $60, $100,000 followers, and then their accounts got deleted.
Yeah.
And it's like you're at so much risk in that scenario. And so I think it's important to have that, whether it is a newsletter or a Patreon or whatever, name your thing. I don't know. But
yeah. So what it is, you have to give them some like carrot on a stick. You have to give them some reason. What are they coming for? Why? So I'm trading a little bit of effort with my email address and potentially you spamming me. What am I going to get out of it? So for example, what I would do is I have a friend named Billy who won a bodybuilding competition. And I'm going to try to slyly sell you right now. Watch what I do here. I'm just thinking this off the top of my head. Let's see if I could do it. I have a friend named Billy, and he won a bodybuilding competition. He was not a bodybuilder. He probably just looked not even like me. He was kind of a skinny guy. He won a natural bodybuilding competition, not the one where you have to have the biggest muscles, but like the best physique.
Yep.
In 1.5 years, he practiced for this and did it. He had 5 exercises that a trainer had laid out for him. Just like pretty simple exercises. 5 times a week he worked out. That's it. The rest of the time he was just like, I'm going to do what bodybuilders are not good at. And that's just staying consistent. Normally they go in bulking phases, cutting phases. He's like, I'm just going to eat really well for 1.5 years and enter this bodybuilding competition. He did that, worked out 5 times a week. Not particularly hard, like hard of course, but nothing like insane. And by the end, he was like roughly 2.5 or 3% body fat, which was nuts. And he won a bodybuilding competition. And I remember thinking, what was that workout you did? Let me have that. It's literally 1 page and it says like workout number 1, 2, 3, all simple, nothing like crazy that you need like really special equipment. And I started following that. So now whenever I go to the gym, I already worked out my arms yesterday. So what's the ab workout? Workout number 3 is the ab workout. So just follow that and crank it out until I'm done. And that's it. And I follow that 5 times a week. That's actually what I do. And I have it in my favorites folder on my phone. So if it were me right now trying to get you onto my email list, I'd be like, if you want this Billy's workout thing, it literally says Billy on the top of it. I'll send it to you via email. Just enter your name at copywritingcourse.com/newsletter and I'll send it to you. Like you enter your email and it'll send you back that picture. You can keep it on your phone. And that's the workout you follow. So what I tried to just do here right now was entice you with something, put a carrot on a stick. So this is my personal workout plan. Here's my meal plans that I use. Here's the thing that I tell everyone to put on their fridge. Here's a motivational quote picture for your phone. It has to be something, or like get my private podcast where I tell you what to do. Or how about this? Here's a guided workout. So listen on your headphones to this workout. It's 20 minutes long. It'll go through abs. You can do this anywhere, even in a hotel room. Something. You got to give them some reason to jump on, right? And so you have to have a little bit of a carrot on a stick. So my carrot on a stick was the Billy workout.
Totally.
What's yours? Is it videos? Is it podcasts? Is it you're going to call them and give them a personalized meal plan? I mean, what is it? You know, you got to give them something. So some of those people want to just create content, but have nothing to like give them. So whether it's a PDF, whether it's a sheet, whether it's a tips trick, whether it's a workout video, you got to have something to get them on the email list.
Yeah, and I think what really made that powerful, just to circle back to like some of our initial conversations, was the story you told, right? Is that story feels like something like, oh, that seems like something that I can relate to and I can get on board with, and I would totally want to be a part of that.
And you know how I knew it was good copywriting? Because every time I tell people, it's a real story. I did have a friend named Billy, and that is a real thing. I'm not lying about that. But every time people be like, can you send me that? Can you send me that sheet? And I would just like airdrop it to him.
What are these 5 exercises?
I know, it sounded so magical, right? Like honestly, you look at them and you're just like, it's a regular exercise. There's nothing like, it's like bench press 5 times, whatever. It's like nothing crazy. Yeah. But the point is that sequence was the trick. And the results that Billy had got was the social proof. That he didn't do anything different. He was a regular guy, and then he won a bodybuilding competition. Just doing that. And also, it wasn't that hard. Like, that's the other thing. It's like, it's not that hard. It was just a consistency thing. So I don't know, like most of it, of course, was like, he was really good at dieting and eating and everything, right? That's the trick. But like, people love having that. I bet you're a little bit curious about what this is now too.
Yeah, well, I've competed in 2 physique shows, and yeah, the entire game for me really came down to, honestly, like the diet side of things.
Yeah.
Like the training, no offense to anybody in that space, but it's not rocket science. Like, do these exercises.
It's totally true. I was at squash the other day, and it was like all dudes in the gym one day, and I was like, who do I want to look like? And most of them are like freaking in great shape.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what's kind of funny? Like, I'm looking at what exercises they're doing, but this is probably like 10 to 20% of the reason that guy's 100%. Jacked. Like, that guy's jacked because he has good self-control. He doesn't have a lot of body fat, because clearly the way he's living is that.
So I know you've never really had a job.
Yeah.
And I wanted to just kind of open people's eyes to that just a little bit, because I think so many people that I know listen to the show were probably in that position where they were in a corporate job or in a position where they just really weren't happy, essentially, and they wanted to figure out how to get out of that scenario, get out of that situation, and kind of do their own thing. But I think that's very daunting for a lot of people, honestly, is somebody who's always had a job for the most part. It's hard to imagine going to this place where like, all right, here we go. What do I do? And so I just wanted to touch on that real quick from basically just like a business and marketing standpoint of like, what would be some of the things that they should start thinking about or start looking into if they decided like, yeah, I want to kind of do my own thing, but I have no idea where to get started.
Yeah. I mean, it's always like, it seems like a dream. It's kind of funny. I've never had a job. And I remember my first blog was all about like finances and stuff. And they would be like, that's so cool, you never had a job. I'm like, I don't think it was like cool I never had a job. I just, I had a business already that was making income, and potentially unlimited income, potentially, with like the downside is like I go to 0, then I get a job, right? And so I'm not against jobs by any means. I'm against bad jobs. If you have a bad job, yeah, that sucks. But also, if you have a good job and you make a ton of money, you meet great people, you like what you do, you have fun working. Sometimes it's not that fun, but hey, fucking sometimes it's work, whatever. But like, for the most part, what's wrong with that? Like, I've never understood why people are so against jobs. And it's just like, when people are against jobs, I'm like, well, I'm assuming your job is bad, right? So you just have a bad job. So first of all, I'd say, can you switch to something that's better? Do you have enough skills? Like, for example, if you're a full stack programmer, like an engineer or something like that, you could essentially work at any place. If you're a high-end programmer, you will get jobs thrown at you all day on LinkedIn, and you could just kind of select your place. If you don't have that many skills, you're not that highly skilled, then your job search potential is lower. So it's like, what can you do? And my advice is actually kind of starting on the side. I've seen a lot of people try to go full time by quitting their job, seeing if they could build something. I think a certain class of people can do that, but not everyone. I would say, can you start something on the side that supplements your income at first? It's just like an additional income, like maybe making $500 a month, maybe $1,000 plus. And then can you grow that to where you replace your own income, right? And then you could politely quit your job and say, hey, I'm going to try to pursue this full time. But I think that's the best way to do it. That's the way I've seen most people do it. I haven't seen anyone really successfully just be like, I'm going to quit and then find something. I haven't really seen that. Like, I think that's a way to do it, but I've just never seen it done.
Right.
There's very few people that could pull that off, probably.
Yeah, because you put so much pressure on needing to get clients, needing to get customers, that the actual piece of it that is required in terms of like enjoying what you do or like doing a really good job, you put so much pressure on trying to get clients.
Well, Also, think about everyone you know that started a business. I have a lot. Most of my friends that have businesses, every single goddamn one of them have tried like 20 different things.
Right.
And especially in the beginning, you don't know what's going to work, what's not going to work. My buddy Sam Parr that did like the hustle, like before that, he sold a thing called itch juice. He was selling like a poison ivy remedy. He was doing all sorts of random hustle. He illegally sold booze online. Like he did all these like random side hustles, like probably 15 of them before starting something successful. I was the same way before I got something that ever like hit. I had a bunch of little small businesses that added up to nice little income. And then finally like something hits and then you go with that. But you have to have a couple iterations of it. That's the thing. So someone says like, I'm going to start this. And it turns out like you didn't really hit the nail on the head with it. So then you have to abandon it. So what I would actually recommend to people is I would say this. I don't like risk necessarily, but I also like to take some of the pressure off. And so what I would say is this. Start experiments. Here's the way I thought about it. Instead of saying, I'm going to start a business doing copywriting, I'm going to say, I'm going to experiment with this copywriting thing. And I would try small experiments here and there. And the reason was, I think what happens when you say, I'm going to start this business, and you register an LLC and you hire an accountant or something like that, you go down, you start playing business and doing all this shit, getting a business account set up, all that stuff. All that stuff is a guise that you're not doing anything to actually sell a real product. And what's happening is you're most likely going to fail on that first business. And the problem is you've told everyone about it. You said you're starting a business. It sounds official. And now you've got to run with it. And then it's embarrassing to just shut it down and try. Whereas if you just say, I'm trying a little side experiment, who cares? It's like I'm building a little website here. If you stop updating it, who cares? If you abandon it, who cares? If you move to something else, who cares? If you go back to a job, who cares? It's just so low pressure. So I would encourage people to like try these little small experiments first and see if one of them catches. And you'll notice, like, try multiple experiments too. Try freelancing on the side. Try posting stuff on Instagram. Maybe post on Instagram for 6 months straight and you get no traction at all. Maybe the world is telling you something, right? Maybe you're not good at it. Maybe you haven't done it long enough. I don't know. There's a lot of reasons. But it's unlikely that you'll just like quit your job, find something to do, and then make a good living off of it. It's like, why don't you try it on the side and then jump ship when there's another alternative? That's my advice. That's the way I've seen it done the most amount of times.
I love that you said play business, because I feel like that's a very common thing. And it's not a judgment on anybody, but I think that is the common thing of like, even as somebody like me who does website design and marketing, is people come to me and they're like, I need a website for my business. And it's like, do you though? Yeah. Do you actually need a website for your business? Do you even have paying customers at this point? I literally just had a conversation with a guy the other day who has all these like amazing workout plans and programs that he has in his phone. And he has this giant like list of all these exercises. And he's like, can you build me a website and put all these like workout plan and videos onto this website? And I was like, why don't you just put them on YouTube? First of all, I don't even know why you need a website. And he's like, well, I want people to pay for it. And I was like, well, do you even know if anybody would pay for these exercises, or are you just kind of like hoping that they would come and buy your program?
Yeah.
And he wasn't right. And he wasn't even to the point of even having a customer. So I love that you said, and like, again, this isn't a judgment thing. This is just like an understanding. When you work with enough people, you start to kind of see trends. And so like, I love that you said that of like playing business. I think that's a common mistake people make, is like, well, do you even have a customer yet? Because until then, you don't really have a business. Right?
Yeah. How big's your audience of people that you're going to tell? It's like, what's your friends and family? And you know, after you try to launch it to them the first time and annoy them a little bit, like, what about the second time? Who is your audience? Zero? Because, you know, whatever conversion rate times zero is still zero. So yeah, a lot of these people don't realize. I think it's harder than people realize too. I think it makes it looks so easy online. Sometimes people are like, I had this business idea and I did this and I make 10 grand a month. I don't think people really see behind the scenes of how hard that person tried. I've seen the behind the scenes of tons of my friends' companies, and it's just like, it's like year in and year out of like, and day in and day out of just like, how do we grow this? How do we make the email list bigger? How do we stay profitable? How do we pay all the people? It's that every single freaking day. And then like 3 years later, when it's running properly, people are like, oh, how'd you do that? And then you hear the story on a podcast. It's a short clip, but it's like, you didn't see all that work going into it. So I think a lot of people, like, it's just cool to like hate on jobs and all that kind of stuff. I don't agree. I think a good job is good. And if you have a bad job, maybe you're not skilled enough to get a better job. And you know, it's like don't blame the job. Well, look at yourself. I think that's a better way of looking at it. I don't think it's like, oh, my job sucks. It's just like, really? Or are you just not making the most of it? Right? Or are you just not skilled enough to get a better job? Right? So perhaps you should up level a little bit. And so that's the way I look at it. I don't think just like quitting your job and trying to find something is wise. It could happen, but I just don't see it happening as much in the real world.
always tell people too, I actually more often talk them out of entrepreneurship than I talk them into entrepreneurship. Because the people that I feel like are really wired for something like that are going to tell me to fuck off and do it anyways. Versus if I can talk you out of it, you're probably not that committed to it anyways, is the way that I look at it.
That's a great point. Dude, Whitney Cummings, the comedian.
Yeah.
She has this thing, like she's like popular in all those TV shows and everything. So at Hollywood parties, she said people will come up to her and be like, hey, I'm thinking of doing a XYZ pilot, blah, 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 podcast, whatever. And she started doing a thing. She said, she's like, she does this. She goes, if you ask me like, hey, I'm thinking of starting she goes, no, you're not. And the people like, them. Exactly. And so, and the people that don't have the conviction are like, oh, that was mean, like blah, blah, blah. And the people that are like going to do it anyway are like, all right, watch me, bitch.
Exactly.
And they do it. And she's like, good. That's what I want. That's what I want to find out. I want to go straight to the point. No, you're not. And they're like, yeah, I probably won't do it. Totally. they probably know where the other person get this. So she found out that like, if you say like, I'm going to do a podcast, she's like, no, you're not. And they're like, well, I've already recorded 5 episodes and got a sponsor. You're like, well, there you go. That's the person. That's the guy, gal that's going to do it. Where the other person's like just still in thinking land.
Totally.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I think my mantra for like years now is like I've gone down this journey of just like building businesses and whatever is like less thinking and more doing. Yeah. Because I think so often we like to like write about it and journal about it and tell our friends about it and post about it. And it's like, great, but what did you do? Did you execute on anything? Because like if you didn't, it doesn't
usually matter. People already did something. Like sometimes like people come to me for advice. They're like, yeah, I want to build an audience. I'm like, well, have you been on any social platforms? They're like, well, I started posting on Instagram and I have like 12,000 followers in the last couple of months. And you're like, yeah. This is the person that's going to do it. They've already just started to try. They just tried low effort things and just see like, does this work? It's throwing spaghetti at the wall, seeing what sticks. And they're trying already. And I'm like, that's the kind of mentality you want. Like if you're just like thinking about doing it, maybe I'll do it. Maybe I have to buy the right mic first to do it. I have to find the proper why, what my real message is, who I am. All that stuff is playing business, right? I think it's all just playing around. There's a lot of that, especially in the woo-woo community. Of people who sell like, crystals and all that, whatever, it is what it is. But it's just like, there's a lot of that kind of like, I need to find my inner why. I've never seen any of those people like really like blast off after they find that out.
No.
Yeah.
Of all the little curiosity projects and side things, and I know you've dabbled in a number of different things at this point. Have you noticed any sort of trends or things that you can relate or bring together of the ones that you feel like came to fruition, or like little things you've noticed of like, okay, this seems to really work when it comes to building a business or doing some sort of digital thing?
It's like, does it like solve a problem for someone? Like, does it add to their revenue or subtract from the revenue? Right? That's the easiest thing. It's best to have something that someone needs. So for example, I think right now, like it's a great time in history to take like podcast clips and like chop them up for people and do a really good job at it. Right. I think that's like a really hard thing. Every content creator such as yourself probably knows like, it takes forever. It's a lot of things. It's harder than it seems to make a 1-minute TikTok clip. It's harder than it seems to make an Instagram reel. There is a good amount of like figuring out what it is, taking out all the ers and ums, editing it down, putting it on size, uploading it, putting it in description, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's a lot. Can you just do all that work for someone? Right? Or can you make it to where it automatically does that? So that's either building some sort of system of people that do it for them and like outsourcing it, or building a piece of software that does it. Like what can you do to make their life better pretty instantly? Right.
I like that. I want to know, what's your belief on, should you do something you're passionate about, or should you do something that gets that revenue or that income that you're talking about?
Like define passion. No one can define it.
That's
right?
a good point. Yeah.
Like what is it? When people use these words, they're just like your inner self, your passion. Tell me what you're specifically talking about. If we're building on this concept of passion, what is passion? And I think most people have zero idea. It's just like something you like. Is that a passion? What is it? Is it something you're good at that you also like? Like what is it? Because in that case, if passion, what I think passion is something that you're good at and that you also like doing, right? Like I like writing. I did it for free for years before I knew you could make money from writing. And so I liked writing already. And then it turns out like I was like decently good at it. It wasn't horrible. I wasn't great. I was pretty decently good. Could that be a passion of mine? Sure. I would define that as a passion. But the thing is, a lot of people want to say like passion, like what do I really love? It's like I love helping people. You're like, in what way? Like it's just, you got to be a little bit more defined about it. Right. So what would you define passion as?
For me, it's more like just like following energy and curiosities, like the things that like energy.
So even when you say like energy, it's just like, I want more concrete definitions in those. Like you get excited by it?
I wouldn't say excited, but I feel like I can get more lost in it. I feel like there's certain things that I do that like 5 minutes feels like 5 hours. And there's certain things that I do that 5 hours feels like 5 minutes. And so like for me, it's like understanding where those things are going. Like for example, back when I used to work in healthcare, I used to be a trainer. I used to work in the healthcare industry. I used to work in physical therapy, and those days were long and dreadful and painful for me in the sense that like an 8-hour shift was like monotony for me versus a lot of things that I do now in terms of editing podcast shows or having these conversations or building websites or doing design work. I'll sit down and I'll be like, oh my gosh, it's 9 p.m. Where did the day just go? And so that's for me has what I've been able to define. And the reason I ask that question is because like I think there's two schools of thought of looking at just the business world as a whole, is that there's people who try to build it around that they're the things that I'm going to use the word again, passionate about, or there's people that have like build your muse, right? Like build this thing that allows me to then do the other things in my life. And I was just curious as to like what your thoughts are on those two schools of camp.
What if you were getting paid 10 times more than you were to be a physical therapist? Let's say you're making $50,000 a year. Let's change that around. You would do the same work, same hours, but all your clients fucking loved you. They raved about you, and you got paid $500,000 a year. Would you have liked that better?
Yes.
Okay. So now we didn't change the work. We didn't change the work at all, but all of a sudden you got more respect and more pay. Now you like it. So something happened here, right? We didn't change the work. We didn't change it. So a lot of people think it's the work itself. Maybe it's the reward you're getting for the work. Maybe it's that like you're working with a company that's an HMO and they're just cycling you to patients who don't give a shit about you. Like maybe that's the problem. Maybe it's the respect. Maybe it's the amount of money. So that's why I'm saying like this idea of passion can be funged. It can be moved around a little bit, right? So a lot of people, if they were doing the same job working for a software company in sales, but they're making $30,000 a year. If they were making $300,000 a year, they'd probably be far more passionate about that. So that's what I'm saying. I encourage you to think like, when you're saying passionate, what do you mean? Like, if I was making a ton of money selling insurance, I don't care about selling insurance, but if I was making $10 million a month, I'd be like, I'm pretty passionate about this. It would change your mind. I think it really would. And if you were more respected and stuff like that. So it's like, what is that? That's why I encourage people to look at that. Like instead of saying, what am I passionate about? I think it's just like a wrong thing to do. It's like, how about this? Here's another way to look at some services you can offer. What has someone paid you for before? Like when I first started, like in high school, I knew how to design websites. That was very unique back then because that was early on. And family, friends would be like, hey, I need a website. I don't know where else to go. Would you just do it for me? I'm like, I'm getting paid for doing websites. And then the next thing I kind of knew how to manipulate search engines back then before it was called SEO. And it was like, well, I got paid for people to do that. So the world is telling me, Neville, you're good at this. That's something you could charge money for. And because I got paid good money for it and I kind of knew how to do it at a decent level, I felt passionate about it, right? So I'd encourage you to just like inspect it like that. I think like finding what you're passionate about, it's like people say like, I love helping people and making people elevate their conscience or something. I'm like, I think that's too fuzzy. It's just I don't think that's going to work.
I like that. Have you ever read any of Ayn Rand's books, like Atlas Shrugged?
I know the theories behind some of them, but I've never read them.
There was a line in it that I read every night before I go to bed. Try to read fiction stuff, and I'm reading the Ayn Rand book right now, Atlas Shrugged. And there was a line in there that I literally read it, and I was like, yep, and then just like closed it and like went to bed. I was like, I don't need to read anymore because it hit me so hard. And she was having a conversation with somebody in the book, and she said, there's no lousy jobs, just lousy people.
I could see that.
And I was like, that's so good. And basically what she was hitting at is the idea of like exactly what you're talking about is like, it's not so much the work, whether you're a janitor or a salesman or a podcaster. It's like it's just work, right? There's nothing good or bad or better or worse about any of them. It's just like something to do, something that takes your curiosity. And it's like if you do a really good job at it and you get rewarded kindly for it, regardless of what it is, like you can feel good about it.
Also, there is this like, there has been like this upsurgence of like mental health and stuff like that. Fine, I agree. But I think people are taking it sometimes way too far. That like anytime you don't like something, it's like bad for your mental health. I think that's like a little bit of a cop out for a lot of things. And people I think nowadays, especially if you're like around 30 years old, you've grown up in a bull market your whole life. So you think jobs are easy to get. Well, guess what? Throughout most of human history, people suffered very hard. Life was brutish. It was short and it was rough. It was hard. There was no opportunities. You only knew like people within 10 feet of you. Like that was your whole life. You never went anywhere. You didn't do anything. You died of whatever the fuck disease you got because no one knows how to treat them, right? You get a witch doctor rubbing leaves on you at best, right? And so that was what most of life was like. And now people are so goddamn soft to think that like, I could just get a job anyway. I deserve more. Like the idea of you deserving something is so fucking stupid to me. Like, you don't deserve shit. No one's going to give you anything. You don't deserve anything. You earn these things, right? So all the people at the top have usually earned it. Okay, maybe you were born into it. Maybe you got lucky. Fine. But if that's not your position, it doesn't matter. You can't change it. So stop. And so for that reason, I think like when people think like, what can I do for my company? What can I do for my boss that's going to get me to where I want to go? What can I do? Now, I agree. Maybe you're stuck in a big corporate cog of a company that no matter how well you perform, you'll never move up. I agree. And perhaps you should look elsewhere. But for a lot of people, I bet if they took the attitude of, even if you work at McDonald's, that if you're like, I'm going to be the best goddamn server out there, what happens is you're taking people's orders and people are like, wow, this guy has enthusiasm. And then the guy down the store who runs the local carpet selling shop is like, hey, did you know that if you sell carpets, you could probably make a lot more than McDonald's? He hires you, you get a better job, you do really well over there, you learn sales, you become a corporate executive, etc. Those types of people move up the chain because of their good attitude, right? Because they're thinking, how can I add value here? How can I make myself indispensable? Because right now, the economy is kind of fluctuating, and likely what's going to happen, there's some big event that we don't know yet is going to happen. The big black swan event is going to happen, some war, something, and it's going to take things down. Hiring is going to become very hard. And I've lived through 2 recessions in my life. And I'll tell you what happens about 2 years after the recession hits is this. Everyone all of a sudden is real thankful for their jobs. Everyone loves having a job all of a sudden, and you're going to see it. I don't know exactly the time frame, but you're going to see it. But that's what happens. It doesn't happen to where it's just like people just like, oh, fuck jobs. It's always like, oh shit, I can't get a job. All of a sudden jobs are scarce because right now jobs are easy to get. You go down the street, you get paid $25 an hour to deliver pizzas plus tips right now. So it's easy, but it won't be. It won't be at some point. And at that point, you'll see people like thanking God for their job, like just that they're employed, even if they're underemployed. But I think it's like, you have to have this attitude of, where can I add value here? How can I make myself indispensable? Those are the kinds of people that move up through the ranks, not the entitled person who's just like, oh, what can I get? Maybe just switch jobs because I don't like this one. It's like, are you really using this to the full potential? Maybe your boss isn't promoting you because you fucking suck. Maybe you're not good. Maybe you're just like a liability. Maybe you complain too much. Maybe you always like want something, but you haven't earned it, right? And so I admire when people are just like, how can I just use this opportunity to propel myself forward and add, like, I want to really make my boss look good. I want to make my company look good. I want to do good work. I want to be known for good work. That's the type of person that moves up, not the type of person that's like, I'm not going to do a good job. They're not paying me $50 an hour. This isn't my job.
In the words of Seth Godin, it's the linchpin, right? Basically somebody that makes themselves indispensable in the system or the whatever they're a part of. It reminds me of a recent story. I'm literally this Friday, I'm flying out to Smoky Mountains with a group of guys. There's 12 of us. And we rented a big old rental van for like 12 people to roll around with all the guys. Yeah. And I had to change the appointment time. So I called Avis and I was like, hey, we just need to move the pickup drop off time from like noon to 2 p.m. on both days. And she's like going on doing her computer thing. And she's like, sorry, like my computer is giving me an error. You're gonna have to call back tomorrow. And I was like, no. Like, and then I called, this was like a month ago. And I called and I was like, no, it's fine. Like our trip isn't for a month. Just like change it when you get a second and then we'll be good to go. And she's like, no, you're actually gonna have to like call back tomorrow. I just can't do it because of the error in the computer right now. I was like, so wait a minute, like you need me to call back tomorrow to ask you the same question that I'm asking you right now because you have an error in the computer? And she goes, yes. And in my head, I'm thinking like, this is the dumbest conversation I've had in a long time because like, if she was that person, that linchpin, and this is where I'm going with this, is like, she would write down my email, she would take care of it the next day and she would send me an email and go, hey, change your appointment, you're good to go, right? But instead, she's just like frozen by what to do or what action to take next because her computer's giving her an error, right?
So do you think that's the type of person you want to make an executive at this car rental company?
Exactly.
Fuck no. Hell no.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I honestly think like with social media and stuff, I think it's easy to call out people. So like you see things that people like, this person was mean to me, blah, blah, blah. But sometimes like I kind of miss the days where you could just tell someone like, you're an idiot. Like you're not doing a good job here. Like you're doing bad. And I think that's important for people to hear sometimes, because they're just like, well, I don't want to do everything bad. Like maybe I could just increase, right? They feel that pain and then they say, how can I get better? And I feel like a lot of people are not getting that. There's a lot of this message about you deserve this, you deserve that. It's like, do you? Why?
Right.
Who says? Where's all this free money to make you a manager when you could barely like handle the computer system going down, right? Like I just don't see where you expect this to happen. And in the long run, that will be the case. Like those people will not move ahead. You'll see it.
What do you think is the most important? I have my thoughts on this, but I'd be curious as to what yours are, because I don't want to tarnish what you're thinking. But what do you think is like the most important skills of just entrepreneurship and just being a business owner in general?
I don't know. I think it's just like knowing what people want, how to solve it, and then just like working hard at that. I don't know. Is that a good answer? What's your answer to that? I'm just curious.
Mine is usually resourcefulness, like somebody that can just figure it out.
That's a good answer. That's kind of what it is when you're an entrepreneur. You're just like, well, how do we make a website? And someone's like that lady that you were talking to would be like, well, I don't know. So I don't know how to do it. That's out of my capability.
Yeah.
An entrepreneur would just be like, okay, I bet I could like just search on TikTok or YouTube how to make a website,
right?
And at least get a rough idea of where to go, right? Or ask on social media, hey guys, any good resources you learned websites from? And they'll go from there, and then they'll learn, and then they'll go from there, and then learn and go from there. I think that's a good thing. Yeah, just like for someone who figures it out,
right?
It's not hard.
But that's like all of life. I feel like, right? Is like, if you can just kind of figure it, like working out, whatever, like you just figured it out, or somebody told you and you're like, all right, I'll just give that a shot and see how that goes. Or yeah, I think that's most areas of life of people who seem to have, depending upon how you define success, right? Is like even dating or like figuring out how to get into a relationship, or like there's no answers to any of these things. I remember I had a great conversation with my brother about when I have two nephews who I love to death. And when he was first having these kids, I was like, did you read any like the baby books or like any of these things of like how to be a parent or how to basically not to mess up your child? And he's like, no, I'm just like, everyone's figuring it out, right? Like that's what everybody's doing. There's no answers to anything. Like he's like, we're just going to figure it out like everybody else.
And they're
does.
having like billions of babies born before like the internet. It's like people figured it out.
Yeah.
I think there's obviously like, you could probably keep a baby alive, but there's probably better practices to learn. But yeah, it's like you could just figure it out. So if you're the type of person that says, I'm curious about X, and then just goes and figures it out, like, can you just look up a bunch of YouTube videos about it? I mean, you can, it's so easy to get preliminary information nowadays that when someone says like, but how do you even like build a website? I'm like, you clearly haven't taken even one step to figure this out. Because if you type in how to build a website, you'll probably find something, if not a shit ton of something out there to help you with it.
Totally.
Right? And so at least getting that preliminary, like watching a couple of different videos. I mean, like if my like ankle hurts, I type in my ankle hurts. It feels like this. I type it in on Google, I type it on YouTube, and I watch a bunch of different videos, a bunch of different articles, and kind of put it together and say, you know, what is the truth here? And so some guy would be like, if you just stretch it like this once, it'll work. And you're like, well, that doesn't sound about right. And then if you watch enough videos from doctors, physical therapists, all saying the same stretch, you're like, well, maybe that's probably the objective truth, right? Most likely. And so I think having that quality is important. And it's kind of weird. Like I hang out with a lot of entrepreneurs, so it just seems like innate. But then you go to like, it's kind of funny. You go to like a cross-section of society, for example, the DMV. And you just see a lot of people there that are just like, and you're like, oh yeah, a lot of people are just like, I don't know how to say it, like incompetent or just don't care.
Yeah, I was thinking about that actually literally today about like, I think there's a lack of just being able to think for themselves. Like I literally, again, had a conversation today. I had to call Wells Fargo about something and she kept putting me on hold. And I was like, hey, like when you figure out whatever it is you're doing that you're putting me on hold for, can you just like shoot me an email? And she's like, no, I can't do that. Could you just like be put on hold for a little bit longer? And I'm just like, man, like, I don't understand like why there's just this lack of ability to just like think for yourself of like, just write down my email and just email me. I don't understand. But I feel like people get so stuck into that system of like, I do step A and then I do step B and then I do step C. And like, unfortunately that puts a lot of people in the scenario of like, you're going to be replaced by a robot at some point.
Experimentation, I'd say, is very important. Especially when I was young, I would just try to experiment, be like, I get really obsessed with ideas. Be like, what if there was a blog that contained all the different WordPress templates out there? Wouldn't that be cool? And then I'd be like, fancyblog.com. That'd be cool domain. And I'd buy it and I'd sit there till 3 a.m. trying to make it. And like, it's a sucky experiment. It ended up making $20 on AdSense. That's a real example of something. It's like, it made a little bit of money on AdSense every month, but it's too hard to update. Ultimately, it wasn't worth it. But the point was, I kind of learned how to make a website. I learned how to do the domain name, all the intricacies of that stuff. And it's just like, I just looked everything up. Like, how do you do this? How do you do this? And then move from there. That's how it works. And so someone who has that quality, I think, has a chance at starting a business versus someone who just like doesn't really do it. Right? They're not executors. Like, you want people who are executors. Those are the type of people that do business. They're not just thinking about an idea.
What has been the most expensive mistake you've made? And that could be monetarily or emotionally.
Maybe just moving down a business with like the where it's not going in the right direction. I think like House of Rave, I remember it was a drop shipping business. And back in the day when that was like a genius thing, like have someone else fulfill it for you. Now it's like, that's so common, right? And what happened was Amazon was coming up, and Amazon has this network of sellers that was making the price cheaper and cheaper, lower and lower margin. So I was like, well, I kind of see where the road is going. I'm making the same amount of money, but working harder every month, right? You can kind of see like, this is, unless something really changes, this is not going to be the same business in like 5 years. And so at the time, I was, like I said, Noah was working on AppSumo, and I started noticing that project of his rising. So it's like, what if I just go with that right now? And so I actually sold House of Rave and went full-time AppSumo, right? Like, I went full on in that.
Yeah.
And I think that's an example of like, I wonder if I could have done that sooner, right? Instead of like just slogging it out. That could have been, so I don't know if it was like a huge mistake or anything. It happened, so it is what it is. But it's like, I think rolling with the wrong thing for a really long time. So I've seen people like when they say, I'm going to do a business, and they're just stuck to that idea, and they're just really rigid on like that idea. That could be a huge mistake, rather than just like, what if I, instead of calling it a pivot, it's like, what if I try this other experiment? What if I try this? What if I try that? That's usually how it goes. Yeah, so being like too rigid on like focusing like, no one's doing this, I need to be the one doing it. Unless you really know some reason of why that's going to happen, like it doesn't make sense to continue down that road.
Yeah, I would say that's probably I ask that question a lot on the show, and I'd say that's probably the most common answer that I get, is that not so much people make mistakes that necessarily lose them money or cost them emotional pain of some form, but more or less the opportunities that they miss out on seems to be the more common thing that I've noticed just in the conversations that I've had on the show. And it seems like, for me, I call it like following your curiosities. I think there's a lot of value in like, yeah, like we, in our earlier conversation of like following your passion, I'm not a big like passion guy either. I honestly don't necessarily believe, I mean, there's one passion that you're supposed to do for the rest of your life. Like, no, I don't think that exists. But I do believe in like following curiosities of things that like excite you. And you're just like, oh, I wonder what's there to learn or what's there to figure out. And then it's through that act of play that you start to figure out like things that work or things that don't work. Because otherwise, when we try to like set our hat on like, this is my passion and this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life, and like this is the most amazing thing and it's going to fulfill me and like fulfill all my needs, my love and my happiness and everything else, and it's like, nah, like just like do what you're curious about and see where that goes. Which leads me to one of two more questions that I have for you. One of them is that you've often been described as somebody who's emotionally stable and mature compared to a lot of your other entrepreneurial friends.
Think, yeah, like Noah always says that on podcasts, and Sam always says that on podcasts.
Why do they say this?
I don't know. I mean, I know, but
do you believe it?
Well, I think both of them, I'm different than Noah and Sam are addicts. Now, I don't mean like drug addicts necessarily, but like if they got really heavy into drugs, they'd both be really into drugs. Like that's just how it is. And it's kind of like Joe Rogan talks about. I think he's an addict. He's just someone who has to do something. I think his outlook is sometimes pessimistic on life. They have to just like act. And they go through like cycles of like happiness and like sadness. So if you look at their life, it'd be like whoop, 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 like up and down, all the ways up and to the right, but like a more like swinging thing. Whereas me, I was just more still, like just slow up and to the right. So I'd say like the level of success I ever am potentially get compared to someone like them, who's far more neurotic, I actually say it was less. I would say my level of success would be less. My general enjoyment throughout life would probably be higher. And man, this might take a weird turn here. And do you want to go down this road?
Yeah, bring it.
This is a little interesting, related to health. I think it has to do with testosterone. I know, I told you this would come to a screeching halt.
Okay.
I have noticed that the level of transparency we have about testosterone production in someone's body, specifically, I'm just talking about males, is low. So the only way to know your testosterone, you have to get a blood test and test it. Now, how many dudes are just doing that in general out of the world population? It's very little, right? And then also sometimes you go back and sometimes your testosterone is a little bit higher, a little bit lower. But let's separate it into quartiles, much like IQ is separated into quartiles. So if I have 100 IQ and you have a 102 IQ, it doesn't really mean that you're way smarter. It's just like on the test, you did a little bit better. But if I have 100 IQ and you have 160 IQ, we could surmise that I'm not ever going to beat you on that. Like you're just way higher. Right. And so similarly, I think with testosterone, there's a certain amount of levels. I think testosterone is measured 1 to 1,000, 1,000 being like almost like clinically too high and 100 being pretty bad or 200 being pretty bad. The people I've known, the guys I've known that had very low testosterone tended to have these mood swings. And I've seen this anecdotally so often that I can't help but think that this is probably going to be very well linked in the future, that people with very low testosterone are tended to depressive states. And everyone I know that with naturally high testosterone, which I've only tested it once and it was relatively high, have pretty stable moods. And then a couple of my friends who you may know started doing testosterone replacement with a doctor because they had very low testosterone, by the way. And these people were athletic. They didn't look like they had like some schlubs or anything. These were like high performance people, but they tended to have these depressive episodes. When they got their testosterone back to around 700 range, give or take, they didn't have those anymore. And I can't help but think that there's some direct correlation between this. And so when they say I'm the most emotionally stable person, I'm like, one, I had great parents. I had a great upbringing, and that is just pure luck. I don't know how to replicate that. If you were abused, molested, something like that in your lifetime, it's going to fuck you up. I don't know how to get around that, actually. So I just didn't have that. So step one, super pure luck, great parents. Great parents, great upbringing, great family, friends. Also this thing of I would go to India every few years and see what it was like in a third world country and then come back to the United States after a few months and be like, God damn, it's awesome here. Like I just had this like innate appreciation for how fucking cool it is over here. Even with like whatever problems we have, we're so much better than like almost every country. It's wild. And so I had that innate appreciation also. So I think a combination of those things were why I was emotionally stable. I had nothing to really be sad about. And then I think I also had the biochemistry of like having relatively high testosterone that the mood swings weren't as big for me.
Yeah, the testosterone thing's interesting, and I can see the correlation there because you're right. There is definitely a correlation between like low testosterone levels.
I'm gonna make a bet. Let's say we have some sort of fancy VR thing where I can have a magical lens over everyone's testosterone. I'm just talking about guys,
right?
And the guys with naturally higher testosterone probably have better moods than guys with lower testosterone.
Yeah, I believe that.
Would that be? I bet I'm more than 50% correct on that.
Well, I do know that because I have a good friend of mine who actually had a stroke in his brain, and he normally had very, very high testosterone his whole life. And then when that happened, his testosterone got dropped to practically nothing. And yeah, he had like a lot of depressive disorders, and like there was a lot of other things that came from that. Now he's on TRT. But
isn't that weird?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of guys will say my life sucks, I'm gonna get on TRT. It's like, wait, but do you actually have low testosterone, or is it like you just make an excuse?
Yeah, I just want to get jacked.
Yeah, exactly. So I think there might be a weird thing. I told you this conversation was going to like go in a different direction.
No, it's good. It's good. I actually, so speaking of testosterone levels, I'll give you the short story of this, and it's kind of funny. So I've competed in a couple of physique shows, and after one of them, I was very fatigued and probably moody at that point. I always associated it with actually just my diet, because like my calories are so low to get ready for a show, which anybody that's competed knows this.
Yeah.
And then I went to a doctor because I was like, man, I'm just like tired and fatigued and just like feel like crap all the time. And she's like, cool, let's do a bunch of blood panels. And she tested testosterone and a whole bunch of other stuff. And I get a message that next day from her, and she goes, yeah, you might need to come back in. This is probably the worst I've ever seen. And you gave the range of like a normal testosterone level is anywhere, in a male specifically, is from, I think, like very low end, like 200, and then the high end, like 1,000. I think is a pretty normal range for a male. She goes 67.
What? Jesus.
And it was like I was like, great. So my testosterone is that of a 14-year-old girl. Perfect. Got it. So we're doing good. And she's like,
wow.
And she's like, yeah. So I need you to come back in. So this is where it gets interesting though. She's like, I need you to come back in. We're going to do like estradiol and like all the sex hormones essentially, and get the test back. And this time it wasn't, my testosterone was a completely different number. It was like 680. And then we did another one, just testosterone level, and it was like 670 or something like that. And so the theory and our thought is that the first one was actually like a typo. It was like an error. Instead of like 67, it was actually supposed to be 670. And still to this day, I actually don't know if my testosterone levels were that low. I know I'm obviously more in the normal range now, but I thought that fascinating.
Like I said, I think the transparency of it, like the way that the tests are, they're not super thing, or if you like masturbate right before a test, it's going to be lower. Like you could mess these tests up. So the thing is, like, I think as this gets easier, and at some point, like your Apple Watch or whatever, your Whoop strap or something, whatever future device, probably just like measure it somehow, just know through whatever method. And I bet you'll see this direct correlation with that. It kind of explains, like, stereotypically, women are like more moody than men, right? I think that's a safe assumption to say. And it's like, wait, they have lower testosterone. Is there something to this? Like, I think it's anecdotally pretty strong that lower testosterone makes you have more depressive episodes. If you have higher, you get less of them. We had a friend that transitioned from a woman to a male, and she had to take testosterone. And I talked to her all throughout the whole thing. And I was just like, what's the difference? She's like, well, I used to cry like every week, and now I don't.
Wow, really?
And I think like just more like, I don't know, logically is what she said. That's her words. And I remember thinking, the only difference was testosterone.
That is fascinating.
I don't know. Something to think about. I'm not saying get testosterone replacement, but I think there are a lot of ways to naturally increase it. Just like eating better, working out on the reg, like lifting heavy shit, just like if you're not lifting heavy stuff, like your body doesn't know that, hey, I need to get stronger. So I think there's a lot of natural ways to do it. Getting out in nature, all that crap. Yeah.
Sunlight, good night's sleep.
All the stereotypical stuff you're supposed to do, I'm sure helps a ton.
All the things.
Yeah.
I got 10 rapid fire questions for you. So just give me first thing that comes to mind. Best business advice.
Try a lot of stuff.
Best marketing advice.
Find people that want your thing and ask them if they want your thing and see if you can make a sale.
Favorite part about entrepreneurship?
Your own boss.
When are you the most productive?
When someone's watching my screen.
I heard you talk about that the other day about like doing co-working stuff here when people are just like...
There's a guy coming over who I hired, and at 3 p.m. he's coming over here to co-work with me, and he sits on the same side of the table and we work.
Wait, did you hire him to co-work with you?
Well, he also writes for me, but like the whole point is, yes, I hired someone to co-work with me, and I bring people over to co-work all the time, every week.
Can I be a part of this?
Totally, you could be on my dock.
100% in on that. Who is your inspiration?
David Ogilvy is pretty cool. I love all the stereotypical ones like Steve Jobs, Elon Musk. I know they get a bad rap, but Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates, I think, do a lot of fantastic things for the world, but just get a lot of hate.
Tell me one secret about you or things most people don't know about you.
Most things. I'm Parsi Zoroastrian, so I'm half Iranian by lineage, like by blood, and half Indian. So that my 23andMe confirms that I'm half and half, Iranian and Indian. So when people look at me, they're like, are you Mexican, Indian, Persian? I have no idea. I'm both.
My dad did the Ancestry.com. This was probably like 2 or 3 years ago now at this point. And then I found out I have another brother. That was an interesting story. Yeah. And so now the kicker of that whole story is that actually he has like, I think 6 or 7 siblings, and like none of them will do the test now because they're afraid they're going to like find a child that they don't know about.
You can technically find that out without them doing it.
Oh, really?
Look into genetics. Actually, like if like even one of your cousins does it, you can analyze who's your brother and stuff by like six removed people.
What would you change about yourself?
Like physically, or I know. I'd be more consistent. I don't have a consistent personality.
What?
So for example, I'm trying to grow my Twitter following to 100,000, and the way you do it is be consistently posting. I can post good stuff and get some hits here and there. I'm just not consistent. So I developed a system and a person that's going to be keeping me on track. So we already did that. And so consistency of like, I'll get really excited about YouTube and do a bunch of videos, and then I'll kind of stop for like 2 months. I'll get really excited again and stop. But the problem is you have to have that consistency. And so as I've got older, I've become more consistent and learned that I'm not consistent myself. So I have to like set a system in place for me to get work done on a normal basis, like have some sort of consequence for that to happen. And so I've been getting better at consistency, but I don't think I'm a naturally consistent person. My buddies Sam and Noah, like they're like naturally consistent.
Right.
And I'm not.
I like you a lot, so I don't want to say something that would make us not jive, but I'm like, that's like my superpower is consistency.
Really? Oh, sure. Nice.
I think that's probably why I do this podcast show, like consistently week in and week out, is like I'm pretty good about that stuff.
But I don't want to hang out with people just like myself. I want to hang out with people like them. They can rub off on my emotional stability. I can rub off on their consistency.
I like that. What is success for you?
Kind of having like whatever you want specifically. Yeah, so it may like I always think like no matter how baller of something I've ever done, there's probably some like sheikh in Dubai that's like, oh, look at this poor motherfucker. like I've flown in a private jet before, and there's some guy be like, oh, it's not even like a big private jet. Like, you know, like there's always like some level, but if like I think if you're happy with like what you're doing and don't really care, and I think that gets harder with social media because you see like the biggest houses, the biggest things, the biggest yachts. You're exposed to that constantly, so when you like have something, you're like, well, there's always this other level.
When were you the happiest?
I've always been pretty happy. I thought my 30s were like a good time. Every time was good, but it's nice when you have like, I like having family and friends around. I like having income. So it's like, it's nice being able to just like kind of afford like what you want without having to worry about where money's coming from. I think that's a big deal. I remember me and my buddy Noah just took a trip to Malibu during the pandemic. And I remember like it was a scary part of the pandemic where I thought we're going to die and like you'll kill your parents if you go visit them. So I was like, I'm not seeing my parents for a long time. We're going to take off to Malibu. We rented a crazy house on the beach, living with one of my best buddies. And we had enough room. We weren't like sharing rooms. Like he had the upstairs, I had the downstairs. Then we had a common middle area. We had a lot of space. And it was like the pandemic and things were like in pandemonium. And I kind of like thriving in like this like unknown, like, oh fuck, what's going to happen? Like it kept me on my toes. And I was living with a good buddy and we're hanging out and you're making money. I can work from wherever I wanted. And that was nice. And I felt like that was a good time recently. Yeah.
Yeah. We call that shaking the snow globe. Like I told you, I'm taking that trip with 12 guys up to the Smokies. And like for us, that's always the opportunity to just like shake things up a little bit.
Yeah.
Because speaking of consistency, it's very easy to get rutted in the same things and not like.
I was also having dinner with 4 of my buddies at a random restaurant. I was like, that was a pretty good time too. I just like being around family, friends, all the stuff like the material stuff, all that stuff. It's a nice to have. I think it's just like, honestly, I remember like going to a trip and we were like in Thailand and the last day, it's like, we could do anything to party. I'm like, I just want to sit on a corner and like eat a hot dog or something like that, some Thai food and like drink. And like, I remember like that being like my most fun part. Like I don't know. I think I'm simple at heart. Just want a bunch of family and friends around. All the other stuff is whatever. It's nice to have money and I'm not knocking it and it's fantastic, but eventually just like having your needs met is nice.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Favorite part about Austin?
Everything's really close. So all my buddies, like Sam lives 4 doors down from here, which is kind of nice. And then my friends that live like in Zilker, it's like, seems like another part of town. It's 2 miles away from here, like literally 2 miles. And so everything's close. I like that. I like that we have water. I like to have some gradient to the city. Like we have hills. So if you go out to the, like Lake Travis, it's very hilly, not mountainous, but hilly. So I like that.
Yeah, I looked it up on my phone. I was like, how long does it take to get there?
Oh, and the reason I've always lived in Austin, my whole family's in Houston. And I think Houston's actually becoming a better city, but it doesn't have water and it doesn't have gradient to the city. It's all flat. And so I think the quality of life growing up here, like being in Austin, was higher. And so I always like that, but I do love being close to my family, that if something happens, I can be home in 2.5 hours. And so I do that all the time.
One of my buddies is getting a dog. And did you know that Houston is the dog capital of the world?
I've heard that. Why is that?
70% of people in Houston have a dog.
Huh.
70.
That's kind of cool.
That's insane. I think Austin's like 50 or 60 or something like that, but still 70% of people.
Yeah.
Especially during the pandemic. I looked up statistics on this. I totally nerded out on it. And like, obviously like 2020 to 2021, there was like this spike in like people searching for puppies and dogs. And
of course. Yeah. And I think now there's like the shelters like overloaded. People are like, oh shit, it's a lot of work to take care of a dog.
I literally actually, fun fact, just signed up for Rover the other day.
Yeah.
I was like, screw it. Like I walk the Ladybird Trail like every day. I was like, I'll just bring somebody's dog and make a few bucks.
I tried doing that. So apparently people take it very seriously. And it's like random guy who just wants to play with the dog every once in a while doesn't do as well as like someone who does it full time. Also, I dog sit my friends' dogs all the time.
Do they pay you?
No, I just take care of my friends' dogs. My friends, like not random people. I don't care about their dogs.
Where can people find you and find out more about you?
Copywritingcourse.com is the main place. Twitter is like @NevMed. YouTube, you can type in Neville or copywriting with a K and you'll see it. But copywriting course is spelled with C's now. It used to be spelled with K's.
You changed it.
I changed it because we mainly had a community, so called it Copywriting Course Community. Imagine that with K's. What that means, and that was a bad look. So we hopped on the C train wagon. Also, the real reason is like I could just never get the domain name before, and finally I was able to buy it.
So I have one more question, but before I ask that question, I just want to acknowledge you for just being just such a happy-go-lucky guy.
Oh,
and
thanks.
being open to something like this and to trying a lot of things and following your curiosities and helping a lot of people and everything you're doing with copywriting in terms of like teaching and courses and consulting and all those things. Obviously, you're helping a lot of people with something that's super important. I just think that's awesome. And for your awesome shirt that says copy, I appreciate that.
Thanks. I appreciate it. By the way, happiness is kind of a choice. So like I consume a lot of comedy. I watch a lot of happy stuff. I don't really watch too many scary movies. And so what you feed in your brain just kind of mimics. And so if you input with lots of laughter, like cut shit people out, keep cool people, you tend to be a little bit more happy. I'm sure there's some biological component to it, but there is work involved. Yeah.
100%. Garbage in, garbage out. That's actually one of my favorite things about Austin is why I live here, is because there are a lot of people like that with that mentality, which I love.
Yeah. Nice.
Final question. So we're obviously talking to a lot of people in just the health and fitness and wellness space and business owners, entrepreneurs, people trying to grow their business, or some of them even trying to just start a business and looking for that new thing of like how to get started. And I'd just be curious from just a business and marketing standpoint, or even a copywriting standpoint, like what's maybe the best piece of advice you could give to somebody who's like, all right, I know copywriting is super important. I know this is something that I should be considering and looking at and like making sure that it's really dialed in so that I can actually build that relationship with my clients and customers. What's maybe like the best piece of advice you could give them in the realm of copywriting?
Well, let's say you want to become a really good welder. What would be the advice?
Weld more?
Yeah, there you go. So when people say like, I want to become a good writer, I'm like, what have you written? Nothing. Well, okay, step one, right? Like put out tweets, put out Instagrams, put out anything, put out any sort of content and see what it's like, right? So I say, if you want to become a better writer, you probably have to get some reps in writing, correct? Mm-hmm. And so similarly, like when people say like, well, how do I become a good writer? Start writing. That's the number one way. So even like inside of our course, it used to just be like a video, but now what we do, we're like, well, learning a theory is okay, but learning a theory and then applying it right away is best. So what we do is we have like a video and then you have an assignment to do. And it's like an easy assignment, like sell me this boat, and it gives you the details of the boat and you put it in the AIDA formula. We give you the formula. So you just kind of like rearrange stuff and you're like, oh, that's how you do it, because you did it. Right. So that's always good. Or we tell people to do a little bit of copy work. So like copy a famous Ogilvy ad, like what I got on the wall over there. Like that's just a couple paragraphs of text. If you hand write that out, you'll say, oh, that's how he's writing. Yeah, you'll start to see behind the matrix of how that writer wrote by just copying their stuff out, even if you just type it out. And so that's important. Just like getting the reps in with those things will make you better. Yeah, like no one sits down for their first painting and they're a genius at it. It's often shitty and then it gets better. Or a comedian starts and they're very cringy and gross and not good, and then they get better. It's the same thing with writers.
Time on task, as a good buddy of mine likes to say. Time on task. Well, thanks for being on the show. Appreciate it. And thanks again,
man. Appreciate it.
And there you have it, my friends. Before you go, I just want to say thank you for listening to the show, and I hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as I enjoyed recording it. If you're looking for more advice on how to market your health business or need help with your website, you can find all my information at coreyha.com. Thanks again, and keep hustling, my friends.